In this video, we're going to talk about lens flares and halos, which, depending on your point of view, can be some of the coolest things about lighting or some of the most terrible and hated things about lighting. Either way, things that you should definitely use with discretion when you're putting your levels together. So first off, what is a lens flare and what is a halo? Well, let's just start with a halo, because they're actually listed first. Now, all I have right now in my scene is a sun, and while I could put a halo on that, and I will in just a moment, it's not going to be readily apparent because the sun is so far away. So let's just kind of start off by creating a little point light right here in my scene, and you'll notice it's actually very far away, so I'm just going to cheat and grab my game object menu and choose Align with View, and that'll put the point light right here where we can see it. Now, if I was to hit play and take a look in my level, we can see the effects of that light. If you look really carefully on the ground, there's a brighter area right here where we're standing, but we can't see the light itself. We'd have to put in some sort of a 3D model. The halo is intended to kind of help that problem. It's a little two-dimensional texture that always aims back at the camera, and by default, it's this little kind of circular, fuzzy look, so that now, if I hit play, we can see generally where that light should be. Very useful if you want to have kind of that, foggy, bright little point light wavering around so that you can see the little Tinkerbell thing. I'm trying to talk with my hands, and I realize it's not really working because you guys can't see that. But it does allow us to see the light itself. Now, we have control over this halo and what it looks like, just not right here. Let me see. If I hit Control-Shift-P to pause, and let's go back over to the game view, we can go under Edit and jump down to the Render settings, and we have our halo texture and our halo strength. So if I increase the halo strength, you see we can tweak the overall size and strength of that. Now, another way to control that, just to kind of point this out, in the case of a point light especially, is the radius of that light. So if I come back over here, we select our light, you take our range and scale it down, and you'll see that our little halo scales down with it. It's just if you needed your light to cover this much space and you think, well, it's great that the light's reaching that far, but my halo goes too far, well, then you got to balance it out by going back into your render settings and pulling down your halo strength. Again, like so many things in Unity, it's a trade-off. Also, here inside of the render settings, you can change the halo texture. As you can see here, it's just kind of this general blob if you haven't set it to anything. Now, I'm going to set it to something terrible just for sake of example. But for instance, if I set this to the number 3, we have a great big floating 3 instead of anything particularly useful. But hey, the 3 does always point at the camera if we wanted it to. Now, I did that while I was in play mode, fortunately, so it didn't actually keep the final setting, but that is how you'd go about changing that. Now, let's get away from halos for just a moment. Let's go back over to our point light, and we'll turn this off. Next, we have a lens flare. Now, a lens flare is not just a texture. A lens flare is its own object inside of Unity. It comes with its own behavior. It will get bigger and it will get smaller. If you occlude it with another object, it'll fade away. But it does kind of the same thing in that it gives you the effect of what a light tends to do when you aim a camera at it. So what I'm going to do is, with this little point light we have here, we'll go over to Flare, and I'll click on my little load button. Now here you see I have 3 lens flares. These will not be here by default if you've just started up Unity. You need to make sure that you have loaded the light flares package, which is included, but if you didn't load it, it won't be here. And we can choose between 50mm zoom, and if I move the window, you can see the result of this, and that's just amazing. We have our small flare, which is probably more apt for what I'm doing here, or we could have a sun flare, which just is impressive.
Every first level has to have a lens flare. I think it's a requirement.
Well, you can usually tell how long somebody's been designing levels by exactly the opposite number of flares they have. But here we have a cute little lens flare. Now we can put one on the sun as well, and lens flares will behave a little bit differently if applied to a directional light. Because right now, if I was to move this point light around, the lens flare will go with it. However, in the case of a directional light, the position of the lens flare is really going to be dependent on where that directional light is rotated. So to prove that, what I'm going to do is take my sun, and let's move it over here kind of next to the Parthenon object. As a matter of fact, let me just hold down the V key, and we'll point snap this guy right over here. I think that's right on the roof of the Parthenon. We'll just kind of lift it up like so. And I'll assign another lens flare. So this time we'll put a sun flare, because that makes the most sense. And if we hit play, if I look right up there above the little Parthenon, we see nothing. If I look back toward the sun, you can see the flare, but because of the way the skybox is, it's not readily apparent. However, if I get the wall between the sun and us, it becomes a lot more obvious that we have a lens flare effect going on there. So you can see that kind of fade in right as the sun crests around the top, which is pretty cool. Now, at the same time, halos do not work in the same way. So for instance, if I hit Control-Shift-P, and let's go back over to our game view, and I turn the halo on for the sun, you see that we do get a halo at the actual location of the directional light. So they don't behave in the same manner that flares do. But as we mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video, please be very careful with lens flares. They do look really cool, but it's real easy to overuse them and start assaulting your player's eyes. But that will wrap things up for this video. Thanks for watching.